near and far. And the conversations continue. And we have, as our special guest, the fourth of a five-part series with Justice Roy Anderson. Welcome him once again. Yes, sir, welcome. Now, we're going to take it a little bit lighter this evening. And while we have been reminiscing, and we keep emphasizing that we're not living in the past, we're just reminiscing. We're just kind of thinking about our story, what they call his story, our story. And how our little area, Port Antonio, Portland, Jamaica, has cast a wide net over the development of many a product coming out of Jamaica on a bigger scale. And tonight, we're going to focus on the arts. And specifically, we're going to focus on the musical presentations coming out of Portland area. So the players of instruments, singers, dancers, artists, poets, and so on, who have influenced the bigger picture of Jamaica's development throughout the world. Now, in my little humble setting there in Central, which is French Avenue, Smart Road, Summerstone Road, Mallings Avenue, East Palm Avenue, my earliest memories of people teaching music was Miss Gregory at 9 French Avenue. And we used to see people, young people mostly, coming in and out, mostly in the evenings after school, learning how to play. She had a little grand piano at her house. And there were other people. I remember Miss Vassell on Summerstone Road, and even Miss Buckley up at East Palm Avenue. And that was one of the first homes I remember with a wraparound veranda with a beautiful lattice work right there on East Palm Avenue. They used to teach piano lessons. And I'm sure there are other people in the general area, Port Antonio, Portland area, who taught lessons in piano. And it's funny how we primarily saw piano lessons, and we never used to see other instruments. We would see other instruments being utilized, like the drums and trumpet and guitar, in like the bands that would follow the lodges, or cadets or soldiers that would pass through the area. And many of the youths developed their talents through the cadet force, say primarily at Teachfield High School. I remember there was a young man named Harold Haflick. He used to play the trumpet well, and then he became a drummer. And there were so many influences that developed into true talents. There was a musical presentation throughout the island called Sing Out Jamaica, and they had the branches throughout the main capital. So there was Sing Out Port Antonio. And from that, there was a development of a band called the Tornadoes with the youths from Bar Fall, Honey, and a few others. How to spell Bar Fall, I don't know. All I know is that there was a whole part of Kinside River right there in infant school. But in order to get there, you had to pass through a man yard named Roddy. It was a ill-tempered Indian man named Roddy. So you have to kind of break through the bushes and go through and go shortcut and go around there. And there was a nice blue hole. So I guess that's what they used to call Bar Fall. I don't know how it's spelled, I don't know where the derivative, but I remember specifically behind here. So a lot of the youths from around that area had developed their talents through the Sing Out Port Antonio. There were some singers. I remember there was a young lady. She came from either Summers Lane or one of those little lanes off Summerstone Road, Orange River Lane, named Carol Brown. And she's still plying her wares in Canada, still a strong singing voice. And I remember also the dancehall, you know, the King Bascos of the world, the Sun Chums of the world. And how I remember there was a set from what we call set, which is a sorry about that, which is basically a amplified set of equipment coming out of St. Anne's Bay that belonged to a man named Jack Ruby. And at this time, this is the early 70s. Remember now, in the early 70s, sets used to just move from town to town. And this is when like a man like Bernie Spear, who was under Jack Ruby's tutelage, would travel to Port Antonio before he became a star. And from that, I remember men like the Bradshaw brothers from Norwich, Tim Nelson, who went on to play drums with Bernie Spear for many years. There was a young man, we call him Steam Pigeon. As usual, everybody as a young man have a nickname. How he come named Steam Pigeon, I don't know. But he ended up with Byron Lee and the Dragonaires. There was Lenford Richards, who was playing with Bernie Spear as well, who came full circle and came back to Port Antonio and was a manager, band player, guitar player, lead guitar player in a little band called the Jolly Boys, quote unquote little. And coming out of Jamaican setting, I don't know if any other band has really made it an international market the way the Jolly Boys. And their primary music pattern was mento, a genre that I really embrace and love. Right there in that little town of Port Antonio, the Jolly Boys. So there were many young men and women who came out of that little town, whose influence in the music scene in general. You know, there was Hux Brown. There was a band by a guy named Rihanna and the Jaguars, who used to play backup for many of the little groups who used to pass through Port Antonio during festival song competition right there at Del Mar Theatre. Many of these men went on to become, you know, prolific musicians in their own right. So the stories go on and on and on. And that was just my general perspective of how many are youths in a small town like Port Antonio. And we can't forget men like Junior Murphy, whose song was #1 and still is a top playing song, Police and Thief. Right there, Summerstone Road, started with in Breastworks, Radius Road, ended up at Summerstone Road, never left, toured and came back right there, even when he was a superstar, even when his songs were playing every weekend on Cops. Bad Boys. And Bad Boys was a derivative of what he was doing with Inner Circle. So he had, you know, he was like the superstar out of Little Town. But there were so many men and women who came out of Little Town who overarchingly influenced our culture. And I, at some point in time, go on to talk about the dancers, the singers, the artists, and the artisans that came out of that town. But tonight, we're going to just focus on the musicians. And with that, I just like to just one little segue. There was a gentleman who I grew up with, a few years older than me, Michael Campbell, better known as Mikey Dread. But I pay a tribute to him because he was the first man I can remember who unapologetically decided that he was going to play reggae music regardless of the price he was going to pay. He was going to play reggae music on the public airwaves regardless of the price. And he was slotted like at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And at that time, JBC, when he started playing reggae music on dub plates at 1 and 2 o'clock, the people would not go to bed. And he only had a 1 hour show right there at Port Antonio, Portland. Mike Dread, the Dread at the control. And he became world known. He toured with some of the biggest groups ever, UB40 out of England. So with that, I just want to make reference to that little town. There was an expatriate by the name of Adrian Booth, who became one of the greatest archivists of reggae artists anywhere in the world. Right now, his library of pictures of reggae artists anywhere in the world is unsurpassed. Adrian Booth taught at Titchfield, came there as a quote-unquote physics teacher, but he was primarily a photographer who came and took the opportunity to improve his photography, latched on to the reggae music, right there out of Port Antonio. So with that, Justice Anderson, I want to kind of just turn it over to you to kind of just give me a perspective as to how you saw some of the influencers at that time, or early 70s, late 60s, early 60s, late 60s, early 70s, mid 70s, coming out of that little town.
I'll go even further back than that, Paul.
Yes, sir, if you could.
Because I think for me, the starting point of any discussion about music coming out of Portland is the Portland Festival of Music, Arts and Drama, which existed long before festival in Jamaica was a thing of independence.
Yes.
The Portland Festival of Music Arts was a one-of-a-kind annual festival held over 2 weekends at which people from all over the parish came to perform their music, their elocution and drama, and that it gave the impetus to a lot of our artists. It's interesting, you've mentioned a number of people, but I want to suggest, no more than a suggestion, that perhaps the single most important person on the international music scene is Noel Dexter. Noel Dexter is one of the number one international choral music writers of all time. I mean, anywhere you turn, any denomination you go to now, they are playing Noel Dexter's music. Oh, Praise the Lord, Psalm 150, and several of his other songs. I mean, Noel is the only person that I know from Portland, Antonio, whose life formed the doctoral thesis of a guy at the University of North Carolina. I mean, I don't know if anybody else who can say that, And then there were the other people who were really important at that time were people like, there's a man named Mr. Todd, who taught music and who taught Noel music. He taught music and he played at the Anglican church before Mr. Watts. And not many people remember Mr. Watts was headmaster at the Crossroads School. But he played the organ at the parish church for years and years. As a little boy living across the street, I'd often go up there because it was a pipe organ, but you had to pump it. So
yes. Methodist Church had one of those. Yes, the pipe organ. I could actually hear the ear being pumped while the notes are being played.
So we'd be round back there pumpkin. So you had people like Todd and Watts and and another famous singer who came out of Port Antonio, and I don't know how many people realize this. Alan Graham Edwards, who had a cycle shop down West Street, was one of the leading baritones in Jamaica at the time. And even when he came out of the festival, he was probably the top baritone singer in Jamaica. So the whole idea of music and Portland has been very special for us. And I'll tell you a little personal story, because while I was still at high school, and we're talking now about the 50s, I was the member of a band with a pretentious name, the Blue Feathers Orchestra, which played at the only club in Port Antonio, Club Yamaka. Every time the tourist boats came in, we would play there. And we play, the boat would leave at like 2 o'clock in the morning. I would play from 7 o'clock until about 1 o'clock. A group of us, including people like a guy named Vincent Orgill, most of you know Maurice Orgill, Maurice's dad. A guy named Willie, who used to play for the lodge and funeral marches on the trumpet.
Yes.
A guy named Panna, who was a renowned drummer throughout Jamaica. Probably one of the best drummers. Always had too much to drink, but a fantastic drummer. And then you had Panna, you had Tuna, who played the guitar sometimes off key, but was one of the few people who actually played the electric guitar in those days. So this idea of coming, I mean, I can tell you that when I was upper 60, 1959, the guy who was in charge of entertainment, and I think it was the Yarmouth cast who was to come to Antonio, approached the band asking us if we would become the resident band on board the ship. Now I'm getting ready to do what was then my high school exam, and the man wanted me to give that up. And so I said, well, I really couldn't do that. I couldn't tell my parents that I'm going to go to sea to sing music when they play all these years watching me grow up to go and study something,
Right.
So I told him, no, I couldn't go, but the rest of the band could go. And the unfortunate thing is, I said, well, if the vocalist not coming, we don't want the band. So that's my own story. I mean,
yes.
And we're talking about the 1940s into the 1950s.
Yes.
And out of that, Hawks, later on, as I went to university, came back, played with a group called the Playboys, and later on also with Italia. With Hawks Round, we as a group from Port Antonio, this is now early 60s, just after festival at the national skater started, won the popular, it was then called the Popular Song Contest, won the Popular Song Contest, beat a guy who was a well-known recording artist, Errol Honeyboy Martin. I mean, yes. Every time if you ask Dwight Wilson, Dwight will tell you, Errol Honeyboy used to say, when I look a country boy, I come to but them I go sing. you know. Well, we whooped him clear easily, you know.
Yes.
We at State Theatre where the finals was. So it was, I think, 1964 or so, 63, 64. I think it was 64. So this idea of music coming out of London is very much part of our genes.
Yes.
And, you know, I think the idea of recognizing Noel Dexter as perhaps the premier choral music person out of the Caribbean and in this part of the hemisphere is also, it's indicative of the kind of attention we pay to our music right from the beginning. It's amazing. And there are a bunch of ladies, especially the Thelma Scarletts, the Dorothy Soares. I mean, all of these people who honed their skills in a Portland festival, but went on to the national scale and became well-known nationally and internationally. So it's part of our DNA, and you know, we really give thanks for that.
Yes, thank you, sir, because that actually, you see, this is the idea behind what we're doing here. Is perspective, because most of what you have just said, I knew of what's his name, the writer, Noel Dexter, right? I knew of him somewhat, but I didn't know the full background. I knew of, for example, Graham Allen Edwards. I knew of him, but not the fullness thereof, in terms of how it influenced, ended up being that part of festival that was adapted. And how coming out of Anglican Church Choir.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of those people who came out of the Anglican Church Choir. There's a man named Mr. Oakley who sang bass at the Anglican Choir, worked at the Public Works. You know, a fellow Owen Gray who died recently, who sang my older brother Lascelles, who is now retired, a tenor and elocutionist, and Ken Thaxter, who now lives in Mandeville. Ken Thaxter was the leading first tenor, not only in Portland, but in Jamaica. Anybody will tell you. And Ken is still around, you know, and I don't think we have paid enough tribute to Ken and his leading role in development of music and music education in Jamaica.
Yes, because remember, it was only late 70s when, for example, the Edna Manley School of the Arts was built.
Right.
Where there was a promotion of the arts as a serious undertaking for
you could actually make a living by art.
for the people's development. Because before that, it was a hustle. I mean, there was people who play by the ship side and play the little banjo and play the little calypso and so on and so forth. And then you'd have little bands in the town and so on. But it was never understood that the artists, the dancers, the musicians, you know, would really be an impactful part of our nation.
Absolutely.
You know, and when I look back and see, for example, I'm going to make a reference to this because this was my experience. When I was 13 or 14 years old, there was no Saturday evening, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, that I would not be at Carter Park. This is when I'm cutting down the palm tree to start make the place a little bit private. So when the tweeter out of front by Caneside River, and the bass, the double bass inside, and the what them call the Delco plant, which is basically just a backup battery plant because you can't use the parish council in a power in a Carter Park. And you have a tube amplifier. Remember now, you know, this is a dance where, you know, Dragon Stout a sell and Red Stripe Beer a sell and Rum a sell. And I'm only 13 or 14 years old, so I can't really go and dance. But I watching the man them warm up the thing. They have the Aquarius set them go to town Friday and get all the dub plates. This was a brother named Carl Sound, he was a spinning man. And King Basco himself. That Basco was not, he never played, he basically owned the set and the name go with it.
Right.
And when I watched that, and my mother would have come at Caneside River right by the bridge about 7 o'clock when it started to get dark. And just fool around. And I have to find a shortcut go home. Because remember now, you know, Sunday morning I have to go to church. And you can't engage around dance or thing. Friday, Saturday night, and I made up I go to church Sunday morning. So my mother make sure you reach home before me, you know, boy. You understand? All right.
Not only you and all the Perry siblings, you know, from and Barbara, Hugh and everybody.
But everybody could have tell when me I go to church, you know, come here ball from go up a French and you go straight past me Sunday, so go straight down to Methodist church. But my experience with the dance, I know dancehall is a genre of our music. And back then it was just people of them like set in a little parts of the community all over Jamaica. And now it's a much bigger undertaking, regardless of the direction people think it take and so on. But I remember specifically when the man used to build them tube amplifier in their backyard. Yeah, use them little electronic skills and build them tube amplifier. So I'm just saying this to say that the perspective that you bring is so much different from mine. And this is why a conversation of this nature is so important for us to understand and to impart it to even people who live in our communities.
Right.
Never really understood it to be so.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, so with that.
Just want to leave one last thought to you, because, you know, when I talk about Noel Dexter, for example, not many people realize that Noel's experience as a musician started because he was a school pianist for assemblies at those times when we had assembly every morning. And Noel took over as a school pianist from my bigger brother, Lassell. And it was for as long as he was at school. And from then started as a band called the Blue Feather Orchestra with these guys. And the rest, as they say, is history. I mean, Noel then migrated when he came to Kingston to teach, went to university, became the leader, the founder, a founding leader, and the driving force behind Universal Singers, which is another international institution of which you can all be proud. And that is part of the genius of Noel Dexter.
There's another pianist who I think is still working with the Universal Singers, who came out of Titchfield. His name is not coming to my mind right now. Who's still active? I remember, very, very affable, very.
I know you're talking about. You're talking about Godfrey Taylor.
Godfrey Taylor.
Another
dynamic musician, another dynamic pianist coming right out of our little era there.
Yeah, no, he didn't go to school at Titchfield, but he taught there.
Yes, right.
Boarded with my mother for a while.
Okay, so, Godfrey, yes, indeed.
It's a small world.
Yes, and a fiery personality, really, really nice guys. To this day, still active in the music business. Yes, indeed. Yes. So, I mean, the stories abound, and I want to just ensure that the generation behind me and the generation, my children and my children's children, this will serve as a testament as to our foundation.
Yes.
And with that, we're going to go into our final part of the series next week with Justice Roy, at which point in time we'll kind of just do a synopsis as to what we have been covering. And hopefully we can get the ideas behind how, for example, some of the dancers, some of the artists, some of the musicians, how they moved out of a little town and made a life for their own. So with that, in parting, I just want to say, just remember, some people give back in kind, some people give back in cash. However you can give back, if you have the ability to give back, giving back starts with giving. So please, regardless of how you feel about politics and religion and the social issues that surround us, just remember, the joy that it brings to your soul when you give back is unending. And with that, I say, what good.
My closing words, Paul, if you'll allow me, is
yes, sir.
May all who come behind us find us faithful.
Yes, indeed. And with that, we say good night. Good night to all. Take it easy.
Good night, all.
All right.
Take care, Paca.
Take care of Justice.